Shabbat Shalom, family. Good to see you all here. Hope you're doing well. Well, we're going to talk about something that recently happened in the news. Donald Trump presented a peace plan to Iran. Iran rejected the peace plan. But when Donald Trump got in the media, he said he rejected them. And it's false. They said Donald Trump did not reject them, but he's got a save face. So he went out in the media talking about he turned down Iran's proposal. Iran did not give him a proposal. Donald Trump provided a peace plan to them. So one thing you can't expect is the truth from Donald Trump. He is just going to keep on lying. And when he speaks, he tries to act like he's in full control of the negotiations. Iran already told him multiple times he will not be calling the shots. And he's still trying to act like he is. And at this point, America looks absolutely ridiculous. And early this morning when I woke up, I was looking at some of the things that are going on out there by the Hormuz Straits. One of the US vessels completely lost power and propulsion out there. And I said, you know what? The US is starting to look like idiots. Not only are you not feeding your military, even your ships and everything are subpar. But yeah, the vessel power went completely out. And at this point, who is going to be afraid of the US? The US can't even protect itself. How is the US going to protect other nations? That's why a lot of those nations in the Middle East now want America gone. They want them gone. And I don't blame them. So let's get into this one. Okay. Let's share. Okay, please give me a one if you can see my screen. No, Donald Trump represents, you know what he does? He represents white America and he represents them well. So this is what these folks are like. Donald Trump is the face of them folks. Whether they like it or not, he is. Thank you.
So they want to make a deal, but Islamabad and tremendous respect for the prime minister and the field marshal. And they're working with us. They continue to work with us. But the trip is a very long one, and we're doing everything in terms of negotiate right now, in terms of the negotiation telephonically. They've made strides, but I'm not sure if they ever get there. There's tremendous discord. They're having a tremendous problem getting along with each other in Iran. The leadership is very disjointed. It's got 2 to 3 groups, maybe 4, and it's a very disjointed leadership. And with that being said, they all want to make a deal, but they're all messed up.
President Trump just told reporters at the White House that these are the options on Iran. Quote, blast the hell out of them and finish them forever, or make a deal. I asked the president if he's considering new strikes on Iran. The president said, why would I tell you that? Then moments later, he said that he preferred not to blast the hell out of them, but called it, quote, the option. So the president also insists that Iran is dying to make a deal, but in the same breath, he also said it's unclear if they're ever going to meet his terms and that he's dissatisfied with their latest proposal. And meanwhile, all of this comes as we have now hit the 60-day mark for the war in Iran. And that means this is the deadline for the president to go to Congress to seek approval to continue using the military in this ongoing conflict. But the administration is now claiming that since that April 7th ceasefire, that the clock has been paused and that they don't need this authorization. Well, Democrats and even some Republicans disagree with that, but there's no way for Congress to compel the president to get their authorization.
We got some breaking news on the war with Iran. I'm Brian. Here's one thing to know on this Friday. We are at a major turning point, as you know, but whether or not this is ending is still up for a debate. Today marks 60 days since the conflict began, which is a key legal deadline under U.S. law. You may or may not know that. The president now telling Congress that hostilities have terminated, pointing out that there hasn't been direct fighting between the United States and Iranian forces since earlier this month. I guess April, now that we're in the start of May. But here's where things get a little bit complicated. Some lawmakers, especially Democrats, they're pushing back hard. They argue that the war isn't really over and saying that ongoing actions like blockades and economic pressure still count as active conflict. One top senator even calling the claim bullshit, warning that the situation is still dangerous and costly. At the same time, Iran is trying to propose a new peace deal, trying to restart some negotiations here after an earlier proposal was rejected. But the president says that he is still, quote, not satisfied and wants a stronger agreement. Specifically, I guess the sticking point here, one that agrees that Iran can never develop nuclear weapons again. And tensions, of course, still remain very, very high. Iran warning that any new U.S. attacks would trigger sustained and painful retaliation. Meanwhile, the United States ramping up sanctions, especially targeting oil trade tied to China, increasing pressure on Iran's economy. So where does this leave things? Well, no active fighting, but rising pressure. Talks are on the table, but there's still no agreement, and both sides preparing for what could come next. Is this the end of the war, just a pause before something bigger? I'm Brian, and that is One Thing to Know today. Follow me right now for One Thing to Know tomorrow.
Well, it seems peace is still far from being reached in the Middle East. Iran rebuffing a 15-point ceasefire plan proposed by Pakistan on behalf of the United States. Under the deal, Iran would agree to not pursue nuclear facilities or weapons in exchange for the lifting of all sanctions on Tehran. Iran say that its conditions are excessive and will end the war at a time of their choosing, launching a fresh attack against Israeli power stations. Israel is continuing their ground incursion into Hezbollah-controlled Lebanon, vowing to occupy the south.
It's now being reported that Iran has no plans on surrendering, and they've also responded to Donald Trump's extension of the U.S. naval blockade by saying it's going to be met with military force. One of the reporters at Dropsite News says not only does Iran have no intention of capitulating, but he said their view is that it's Donald Trump who has the clock, with sweat increasingly pouring down his face. He reported that a senior Iranian official told him the most likely long-term scenario is not a major deal, but a continued low-intensity tension, with Iran believing time is on their side. Iran's response to Donald Trump's recent U.S. naval blockade extension seems to confirm they're not afraid and have no plans on surrendering. They said the blockade will soon be met with practical and unprecedented military action, saying patience has its limits, and that Trump's decision leaves Iran no choice but a punishing response. They say that Trump is now searching for an off-ramp, having suffered significant losses on both the battlefield and at the negotiating table. This comes after it was being reported that U.S. intelligence agencies were actively analyzing how Iran would respond if Donald Trump was to falsely declare victory and basically surrender just to end the war.
And Iran's new supreme leader is making new threats against the U.S. In a new statement, the Ayatollah says U.S. ships have no place in the Persian Gulf except, quote, in the depths of its waters. He's also taking a hard line on the country's nuclear program, saying Iran will protect its nuclear and missile capabilities. Tom, the supreme leader says a new chapter is emerging in the Strait of Hormuz. What do you think he means by that?
Well, I think it's always quite difficult to know exactly what the Iranian leadership means in a comment like that. I think what the suggestion is that Iran, and this has been muted by Iranian officials before, that they might hope in the future to charge ships going through the Strait of Hormuz. But I think the wider point here is that Iran is doubling down, firstly over its control of that critical waterway. We've been hearing from Rebecca there about the impact that is having on the global economy and gas prices in the US. but also on the red lines in the negotiations. The Iranians are doubling down on the idea that they would give up their nuclear program, that they would give up their missile program, and it's a defiant message. Yes, we're not seeing Mojtaba Khamenei again. We're not hearing his voice. We believe, and US officials have said this repeatedly, that he was badly injured in missile strikes by the US and Israel at the beginning of the war, which killed his father. But it is a sign that the negotiations are going nowhere and Iran remains defiant. And while it's got a stranglehold over the Strait of Hormuz, it believes at least it can outlast the US and not be forced into a deal which it feels it could not accept.
Iran's supreme leader issues a message rejecting nuclear and military concessions, while Trump weighs his military options. Despite the war, FIFA's president confirms Iran will play in the World Cup in the US, and more people are killed in Lebanon. Here's everything you need to know about the past 24 hours.
Well, if Johnny said it, I'm okay. Did Johnny say it?
You did? What if they
Johnny
win?
Infantino, that's a piece of work.
What if they win?
Well, if they win, we'll have to worry about that. That's not
where disruption drags on through media. Growth falls to 2.5%. Inflation, it's 5.4%. 32 million people are pushed into poverty.
Let's begin in Iran, and Supreme Leader Mojtaba Khamenei has released another message of defiance, his third since the war began. Khamenei is yet to be seen in public, and so his statement was read aloud on state TV. It said Iran will not give up its nuclear and military capabilities, and declared a new era of control in the Strait of Hormuz. Khamenei says the US has suffered what he called a shameful defeat and will be forced to leave the region.
ما با همسایگانمان در پهنه آبی خلیج فارس و دریای عمان هم سرنوشت هستیم و بیگانگانی که از هزاران کیلومتر دورتر طمعکارانه در آن شرارت می‌کنند جایی در آن ندارند مگر در قعر آبهایش.
On the other side is US President Donald Trump, who maintains that Iran is ready to give up and is, quote, dying to make a deal. The US keeps tightening its naval blockade of Iranian ports with the aim of hurting the economy and forcing concessions. Trump says it could last for months and hasn't ruled out a return to war. He's reportedly been briefed by the Pentagon on options, including short TARP strikes and ground operations to seize parts of the coast. The region remains on edge. The UAE has banned its citizens from traveling to Iran, Iraq, and Lebanon, citing regional developments. Those already there are being urged to return as soon as possible. The uncertainty has sent the price of oil soaring. It briefly hit more than $126 a barrel at one point, the highest since the war began. The last time the price reached this level was in 2022 when Russia invaded Ukraine. Despite the ceasefire, oil prices haven't fallen by much, holding around $105 a barrel, showing just how little confidence markets have in the situation. But the impact isn't only felt in oil markets, but football also is being pulled into this crisis. FIFA confirmed that Iran will take part in the World Cup, which starts next month in the US, despite Trump suggesting earlier that it might be better for them to stay home and for Italy to replace them. FIFA President Gianni Infantino rejected that idea, insisting Iran's place in the tournament is not in question. In Lebanon, the picture is more complicated because despite a ceasefire that began 2 weeks ago, deadly attacks haven't stopped. Lebanon's health ministry says Israeli attacks killed 9 people, with other reports putting the toll much higher. Hezbollah is firing back along the border, and an Israeli soldier is reported to have been killed in a drone attack. Fighting is escalating, and Israel says it's ready to resume the war with both Hezbollah and Iran.
אנחנו תומכים במאמץ ונותנים את הגיבוי הנדרש, אבל ייתכן ובקרוב תידרש לשוב ולפעול כדי להבטיח את מימוש היעדים.
That's it from me today. Stay with us on Al Jazeera for all your developments in the war on Iran.
Huge breaking news. Iran officially rejects all of Donald Trump's terms as there is no deal. Now, as you know, today in Pakistan, the U.S. and Iran met to try and bring an end to the war in Iran. And to hear Donald Trump and his team tell it, Iran has been begging to make a deal, that they have no cards to play and they're in no position to make demands. Well, apparently Iran doesn't know this, as they have completely rejected the terms of the U.S. And it's not me saying it, it's J.D. Vance. Take a listen.
Things we're not willing to accommodate them on, and we've made that as clear as we possibly could, and they have chosen not to accept our terms.
Yep, they're not accepting our terms. Think about the point we are at right now in history. We had Iran just a month and a half ago at the negotiating table, ready to make a deal. We instead decided we would go to war, thinking we would put them in a far worse position, and instead we only made them stronger. Only Donald Trump, with the might of the U.S. military behind him, could make our enemies stronger. This is an unbelievable moment in history.
So a lot of people was echoing what Trump said Wednesday, that the war should be over very soon. But yesterday, Thursday, Iran's supreme leader says Americans belong at the bottom of the Persian Gulf. His words verbatim were, Americans who come to the Persian Gulf from thousands of kilometers away to act with greed and malice have no place in it except at the bottom of its waters. It was read out on state TV. Trump said the war can end if they just give up their nuclear program. The supreme leader, Iran's supreme leader, has made it clear that Iran has no plans to give up their nuclear and missile capabilities. He also said yesterday, by God's help and power, the bright future of the Persian Gulf region will be a future without America. Y'all be safe out there. I love you. Big Ducat. You already know. Thank me later.
Iran says it will not go to peace talks in Pakistan as long as the US blockade of its ports remains in place. Those talks were meant to begin today, but over the weekend, US forces seized an Iranian-flagged cargo ship near the Strait of Hormuz. That seems to have derailed the process, and this morning the Foreign Ministry spokesperson claimed the US is not serious about pursuing the diplomatic process. American forces seized that Iranian ship after it defied repeated orders to turn around. President Trump posted, the Iranian crew refused to listen, so our Navy ship stopped them right in their tracks by blowing a hole in the engine room. Right now, US Marines have custody of the vessel. Hours earlier, Iran fired on 2 Indian ships.
The White House has informed Congress that hostilities with Iran have officially ended, but there's a few reasons why I wouldn't be surprised to see the opposite. To start, just before we got that statement today, the president was speaking to not wanting to accept Iran's latest terms and that he did not need their permission to extend the war because the ceasefire had terminated those hostilities, according to him. But you can't reject a peace deal and claim the war is over at the same time. It's kind of my main issue. There's a little more to it, though. The War Powers Act limits a president's military action for only 60 days before ending it. That clock ended today, Friday, May 1st, stopping it. 2 things. It denies its opposition ammo, like a blatant violation of the War Powers Act that falls in the boundaries of what Congress today or after the midterms can do something about. The other part of this is the fact that this announcement, like lots of other positive news about the war in Iran, comes on a Friday. The stock market closes for the weekend. Good news gives the investors the confidence to buy. Bad news makes them sell. And them selling is bad for these publicly traded companies' bottom line. They don't want their stock prices to go down. To summarize, it's more feel-good messaging for stock and oil investors on the day the market closes. Or in other words, it's more market manipulation. Because what we haven't heard out of all of this is that Iran has accepted a deal, which would be the clearest indicator that what he is saying is true. This move accomplishes 2 things. It gives Trump another opportunity to ask a Republican-dominated Congress to let him attack for another 60 days. And it does a huge favor for those who are heavily invested in the American empire via the stock market. His moves have destabilized markets, tariffs, trade wars, policy shifts. Stocks have been volatile. So when things get rough, positive headlines become essential. A Friday announcement of hostilities ended steadies investors' nerves heading into the weekend. It's market stabilization as much as legal cover. But the hostilities, as they're described, have been going up until the second that they announced they ended. And I wouldn't be surprised if we find out sometime next week that they have, in fact, been continuing. I cover news, politics, and current events. Shoot me a follow to stay up to date.
Yeah, no, that Donald Trump is the beggar in this whole thing, y'all. Don't believe the hype. We next I3I. Thank you. I know. Oh, okay, hold on. Every time Trump or his goons say Iran is begging, don't believe that, y'all. It's Trump that's begging like a bitch behind closed doors. Yes, it really is. And thank you for your support from my channel. Thank you. No, it is, a dark-skinned brother. You know what I don't like? I don't like how nobody in the media will call Donald Trump out. They'll just repeat his words or they'll let him stand there and tell all kinds of lies and nobody will call him out. They act like they're scared to say anything, that challenges him. There is no way. Why would Iran have to beg when they didn't lose the war? You know, Donald Trump got every reason to beg. Number one, America don't have enough ammunition to continue the fight. And number two, Donald Trump ain't going to get what he wants. Iran already repeated multiple times they're not going to give up their nukes. And they mean every word of it. They're not going to give up anything to America. So I have a feeling this blockade is going to be long and drawn out. And the other nations are already cutting the US out of everything. So it'll be interesting to see what's going to happen. Yeah, a lot of people are sick of him. I think the entire globe is sick of him because he's put every single nation in an economic crisis, including here. And he has no concern. That's why I showed you those videos on the gas prices. He has no concern about the fact that people got to pay more for gas. It does not bother him at all that folks are struggling out here. He could care less. All right, y'all, I'm going to go ahead and conclude. We have our Bible study coming up at 1:45. So I will see some of you then. Those of you that won't be there, have a wonderful afternoon. Shalom, family.